Hi, folks. This is work group device management native resources meeting uh, for March 10th. And let me check the agenda here. It looks like we have one item, which is Francesco.
Yay. Hello. So, two topics related to the DRA CPU driver. The first is about a webhook which we were developing. Contributions from Marlow. Thanks about that. So, the basic problem which I want to, or thing which I want to raise to this audience is that essentially we need to let me step one step back right now. Why we want to add the webhook in the first place? Because up until the DRA native resource cap materialize, basically we need to keep in sync the pod resource requirements and what we have in the resource claim. This could be improved. We can integrate to the pod level resources, but essentially we need to keep two mm, the two datas in sync again up until the cap native resources becomes becomes merged and usable. So back in time, we thought that adding a webhook, first validating and then mutating webhook, could be a useful UX stopgap improvement till that epic materialize. And that brings us to this topic, which is actually, syncing on behalf of the user the pod level resources from the resource claim, and which ultimately requires us to have the bot resource claims referenced by the pod spec and the pod spec available at admission time so we can actually do the validation or the mutation. But it turns out that doing that robustly is harder than what we initially assessed. And I had a chat in the in the work group device management channel, mostly with John, about what's the best way to do that. And turns out it's a kind of open point. So this seems to me that there is not really a robust way to add that to webhook. So adding that webhook should be reevaluated. And I think that I'm starting to think that it doesn't bring so much value to the user. But this is a question I would actually like to raise to this broader forum
So,
before. Yeah, go on, please. I'm
yeah,
done.
no. So if I could just summarize the discussion we had. So right, the issue is that these things have to match, and the values in the resource claim and the values in the pod spec and container spec have to match. And the problem is at admission time, I mean, things can be admitted in any order. And so at the time the pod's admitted, the resource claim may not exist, in which case we can't read the data from the resource claim if we want to make that the source of truth and update the pod spec. Um, Now we could, there's two options basically. One is you reject the pod, um, and then hopefully the resource claim gets created in the meantime, and then there's a retry on the pod and it all works. Alternatively, if we don't want to reject the pod, then we can do something which is probably really bad, which is um, um, the source of truth becomes the first thing that's admitted, and the second thing that's admitted gets corrected to that. So that's probably terrible, but um, it would it would allow things to be admitted in any order. If the user specified things correctly, everything would work. If they didn't specify things correctly, it would randomly pick between which one took precedent. That's just what seems so bad about it. So and then the third option I think is what Francesco's saying is like, let's just punt on this until the cap's out there. Um, I mean, does that are people following what the issue is, or do we need to make it clearer?
Okay, so up until someone else comments, I think that the whole point of this exercise is to streamline the UX. So I don't clearly see a UX benefit in all the three options we highlighted. So I was, I'm more and more leaning towards, hey, it was good that we tried. It's good that was attempted, but I'm struggling to see the benefits more and more. But yeah, I mean that's the whole point of this point is to discuss this in this forum. So everyone, other opinions are welcome.
Sergey.
Okay, yeah. I'm curious about UX though. I wonder like maybe somebody who tried it already can tell if better UX for users will be to specify pod level resources all the time, and then CPU driver will assign specific CPUs to specific containers. So instead of checking individual containers being in line with CPU usage, we just calculate the total of a pod, and then total of a pod will have with scheduling, and all the allocations will be done with driver. Will it be the better UX? I think Marlo, if you tried it, maybe you can comment on that.
And we were doing a summary of the pods and doing that comparison summary of the containers and doing that comparison with the total specified by the pods, but we still have this issue. I haven't tried that specifically.
With pod level resources, you can specify just single request and limit for entire pod, and you don't need to worry about how much you allocate to specific container from a pod spec. All the allocations will be done through a DRA driver.
I mean, that's essentially what the cap does, right? But the issue here is without the cap. And sorry, I know Praveen, you have your hand up. The issue is without the cap. In order to use it properly, you need to make sure these values are set, in a coherent way. And I think the question is really just, do we bother implementing a webhook to enforce and or correct that is done properly, or not? That's really the question at hand. And if we do, what is the thing we should do? Because there are issues with either choice. Praveen?
So yeah, to Sergey's point, like setting pod level resources would work provided we do not set requests at a container level as well. If the same container references a resource claim, right? So are we we would need something to validate that at least. Like basically, if the container also sets container level limit along with pod level limit, then kubelet would do some enforcement, and that would result in incorrect C group settings, right?
I see. I understand what Sergey's point is. So you're saying, hey, maybe we can just look at pod spec and we can validate that if they're using a resource claim, they're not setting a container spec level. If they're using a resource claim in a container, they're not setting the standard resource stanza. Do we need them to specify the pod level resources? Like, what is the actual validation? It's they must use pod level resources and they must not use container level resources if they're using a resource claim. That would be the webhook.
Yeah, basically. Go ahead, Sergey.
No, I was thinking more yes to what you're saying. Like, if user can only specify pod level resources, then our webhook will be much simpler, and I don't think it will spark any debate. It will be like very basic calculation. From a perspective, and then cap will be implemented natively because cap already supports pod level resources and doesn't do anything with that. So that will be like ideal for us if people start adopting it as is right now with pod level resources, and then transition to cap if cap will be.
The transition becomes really simple. Yeah.
But
So
sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking if there are any reasons to specify container level requests and limits, and if there are, how important this is for GA of this driver. Like, can we release without it?
Like, there can't be any reason to specify them because you can do the equivalent in a resource claim, right? So if you're saying you're going to use this, basically we're saying you're going to use it whole hog and you're going to you can only specify pod level resources. Any container level details you need to do through resource claims, at least for when you're using this driver. Like, there's nothing you can do in the container spec that you can't do in a resource claim. So in that sense, you're not forced. That makes sense.
You have some sidecars that you want to limit very aggressively. I just don't know what other use cases there may be, but even for sidecar, I think people will survive without this ability. And we can allow limits. Like, limits doesn't
Because
matter.
we can't do a resource claim on a sidecar.
No, I mean, we can, but like, people may not want to like a specific CPU request, specific CPUs for a sidecar. So it's not important enough to.
No, they wouldn't need to say specific CPU, but they could say the limits.
They might want to use an efficiency core if you're using a particular type of hardware instead of a performance core, and say, please don't assign this to your high performance cores.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the proposal emerging from this conversation is to steer in the webhook towards pod level resources and actually validate then the user is setting pod level resources, but not container level exclusive resources, and depending on the resource claim to do this specific allocation. Is that a fair summarization of what we discussed so far?
I'm wondering if this practically will simplify adoption and we can declare GA faster. If it's too much of a limit, then we may need to, like, I'm just curious if somebody will need to request on individual containers. By the way, limits we can specify on any container. Limits doesn't matter.
I think I'm not completely sure that eliminates the requirement to validate the resource claim to ensure consistency, which is something the CAP will provide us. I, for myself, that could be something to explore, though, from my perspective. I can't say anything conclusively just yet.
But CAP will not provide it. Like, CAP doesn't provide any validation that pod level resources are not higher than individual claims. Will it?
Yeah, the claims will be limited to pod level resources. The pod level resources gives you the overall shape of the claim, shape of the pod, and anything done in resource claims is constrained by that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Is the proposal now that like we only check if pod level resource is specified or not, but we cannot, like, we still run into the same issue if we want to ensure that like the pod level resource is greater than the whatever we request through the claim, right? Because claim can be created asynchronously. So the validation would just be a check for presence of pod level resources if we are using DRA driver, or am I understanding that incorrectly?
That's correct. We can't validate that the claims are smaller than the pod level resources, and we won't be able to with the CAP either, just because they're distinct resources and the API infrastructure doesn't let us do that. Like, I mean, you could, unless you want to reject pod, unless you want to force ordering such that the resource claim or a resource claim template is created first, right?
Okay, that's what I thought originally. So even with the CAP, you still need to have this webhook. So we can either implement or postpone. I really don't care. Like, what I
well, with the CAP, it's not a webhook; it's just validation. Because the point is the validation can only look at the individual resource, unless you want to force ordering of resource creation, which rarely we want to do. Like, that's something very, very, very rare.
The webhook's already created, so if we just know what we're checking.
Yeah, like I think the way I'm reading it is kind of what Francesco's or what Ravin said. Like, and what I'm understanding is Sergey is suggesting, and I think it's a good idea. I'll put it that way. Is that what the webhook should check is that if you're using this driver, in your pod, you should be not setting container level requests and limits. I don't know that we need to require you to set pod level requests and limits, but we could require that. I guess we have to so that the scheduler understands how to schedule you.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be consuming resources that you didn't specify.
From implementation perspective, though, we can only tell if a pod is requiring the services of this driver if it is references a resource claim which is ultimately served by this driver, which is, unless I'm missing something, we are circling back to the point of comparing resource claim
right.
and pod.
Yeah, because with that, we don't always see as a resource claim template name or a resource claim name, and we don't know what driver it's referencing.
Okay, I don't want to switch topic, but this could set things in perspective because we have a rough milestones set in for this driver, and this webhook is actually the last missing thing for our first release, which is far cry from GA, but still. So to put things in perspective, we are discussing that because this is the last thing we agreed to put in for the last release. So this kind of circles back to the point of do we want to punt this, or is worth spending more time on this research about the hook? Because I'm getting the feeling that this is harder than it looks ultimately.
I mean, I think we could release it, and it would
Okay.
be, I would say, here's your constraint, and maybe we need to describe what's going to happen if you make a mistake. But and then we can debate whether we should be. I mean, we can force the ordering. Like it's not like we look at resource claim template. If they're referencing a resource claim directly, typically they wouldn't, like in a normal flow, if it's a controller creating it, the resource claim template most likely already exists. Like if it's a human creating a pod, which is a stupid thing nobody ever does, then yeah, or they're applying pods, raw pods, like I could imagine you could misorder your manifest. But realistically, practically, you should almost never get pod rejections because the resource claim template doesn't exist. Because typically when a controller is creating these things, you're applying the controller resource at the same time as the resource claim template resource. So like the race condition is and then those controllers retry anyway. So like I honestly don't see this as a huge thing if we do reject the pods when the resource claim isn't available yet. So we could implement that and have a bit you can flip it off. I don't know. I don't. It's actually doesn't seem that bad to me.
Okay. Okay. So my summarization would be that pivoting the hook to check or assume or work with resource claim template references in the pod and taking into consideration pod level resources. But I will summarize as an action item to me. I will summarize that in a Slack thread on the workgroup Slack channel so we can iterate.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Of course, I will. And the other emerging topic is that this webhook is not really a must-have for the first release, and it could be added in the follow-up release, which we already started accumulating stuff from our backlog.
Yeah, I think if we're not calling it GA, it's just a first alpha.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, any other objection or concerns about postponing, incorporating the webhook from the release, just to get some lazy consensus or not? Okay. It is not as final. Of course, we can still chat on Slack. So yeah, that covers also the other topic I had. was actually the main missing item for the verse plan release. We still need to figure out some bureaucracy, but other than that, that's it. So we're gonna have the release with the webhook probably likely punted far, however, stripped, and then we will keep working on that and keep the development in, because there already some backlog filing. So yeah, Praveen, Marlo, any comment, any concern from you folks?
Yeah, I think I agree with this. Just that, like, maybe we can add some details in the documentation as to, like, without the webhook, what is the expectation in terms of config, like with pod level resources, without pod level resources, at container level, and so on. I think if we do that, we can maybe like pick up the webhook thing for next release.
Absolutely. Okay, this is everything I had. Thank you, folks, for the feedback.
Awesome. I think Sergey added one item, which I like. When can we call this thing GA? Obviously not in the first release if we don't do the webhook. What are the tests we need? Like what do we need to call it GA? Can we establish some criteria, and can we set a target for it, a first GA? Because I don't know, Marlo, I know you're planning on, my understanding is you're planning on using this in the next version of Slinky. Like, I assume you'd want it GA by then. Like, what do you have a requirements around timeline? What's the status there?
I would like it in GA sooner than later because we are using it as it is now, but we can just say in documentation, use at your own risk until we're ready. Because we work without it too.
Right. Do we have any? What, Sergey?
KubeCon is coming up, so
yeah, you would be. You want to? Heck, that would be really great. Yeah, say hey.
We have a talk. Praveen and I have a talk with Bridge.
Yeah, I'm just curious what else is missing, and like I was thinking that CAP may be blocking it, and that's why maybe we need to have a webhook that will not allow this container level request. So transition will be smooth, but maybe there are other ideas how to do transitions. What else is missing? Like, can we just say like it's ready, like it's done?
It depends on the definition of done, and this is the answer everyone hates, but it's true because, for example, one thing that emerged is that we cannot really have a separate memory driver if we want to do alignment. So merging the memory support is something that at least needs some consideration and then renaming, probably, or not. And the other thing is that feature-wise, we are not we are not feature-wise, we are not on the same level of the built-in CPU manager. So there are things through policies that you cannot do with the driver.
I mean, I don't know that we need to have, like, if you look at the criteria for like going to beta, which is equivalent to going to GA in Kubernetes, it's like you have to have a coherent set of features that all have, you have to have an MVP. So I think the question is, what is our MVP? Is like the webhook part of that? Is the memory part of that? Or can we add those things later? Like, we'll have more releases that'll have new features. So yeah, I'd love to see a proposal from, from you and Praveen, Francesco, you and Praveen, probably, for what you think that is, and then it's a SIG node project, so I would ask the SIG node approvers to weigh in on whether they think that's sufficient.
And to be clear, I don't see it as a replacement of CPU manager. I think it's more of a, like, there is a super advanced scenario that DRA allows, and then in future it may allow more scenarios. And we have like so many proposals from Sasha on like APIs, and like we have so many ideas in a head, but I don't think it's blocking us. Like, we don't have to be replacing CPU manager.
I agree. I don't think we have to do everything in order to be to have an initial version that's GA.
No.
Yeah.
The thing is, the thing that makes me wary, and I will really like to have Pravin's comment, is that considering the limitation that we have right now, I'm reluctant to call it GA because I cannot say, hey, no worries, we will have backward compatible API changes and it's going to be fine, because some things in the roadmap is not yet clear how do we do that. So first releases stabilize, have stable as possible APIs, call it beta. Well, sure, I see that happening in the next few months. GA, however, carries a different. It's not about completeness; it's about stability. If it is about stability, I'm reluctant to say, no, it's fine. It's going to be GA very soon. So that's my take right now.
No, that's fair. Like, can we make maybe we should make a goal then if for KubeCon NA or something to have a GA release, like that gives us quite a bit, months.
Yeah, I'm tentatively, I'm fine with that, but now I'm shutting up so others like Praveen can comment.
Would we also consider KEP as like the requirement for? Sorry, if this is covered, like I dropped for a few minutes. So is KEP considered like a requirement for GA?
That's the question Sergey's asking. Like, do we really need to bother waiting for that, or can we just do a webhook that kind of like forces things to be in a shape that will be compatible with the KEP? So like people can't create workloads that then won't work anymore with the KEP. Can we create that webhook so we have a path for workload compatibility, stability, like Francesca's saying? And if so, like how soon can we declare victory? What are the criteria? We don't have to decide it here. Like I think that we should decide it soon though. Like what are the criteria? And then we ask Signode to say we agree with those criteria or we have different criteria. Like, but it sounds like the opening bid could be the criteria are we have a webhook that ensures workloads that make use of it today will continue to work in the future with the KEP changes and things. And we have enough code level stability that we don't think we have enough tests, we have enough whatever to make sure that the quality is there. And then functionally, we don't see the opening bid would be functionally what we have. It doesn't need to do everything CPU manager has and doesn't need to have memory. Although maybe it needs to be renamed if we're going to do all native resources, not just CPU. So that would be the opening bid in my opinion, but others can weigh in. Sergey?
Yeah, I don't want to get into design details, but I'm trying to understand, Francesca, I'm trying to parse what you said about backward compatibility. My understanding today is that we expose CPUs as resource sizes, and then we assign, like we can only claim individual CPUs today. We don't have any pools of CPUs, anything like that. So do we care about compatibility of properties on the CPU? So we think the CPU will not be something we will expose in future, like individual CPUs. What kind of backward compatibility are you worried about?
First of all, the fact that we have actually two ways to expose the CPUs. Indeed, one of each CPUs it's its own devices, and the other, which is called grouped mode, on which you expose the leveraging consumable capacity and partitionable device, or just consumable capacity for sure. Now my memory is bad, so you can slice your NUMA nodes, group by NUMA nodes, group by socket, group by PCA root probably, and then you can take some parts of it. So the fact that we have two modes is already, and we believe that the best way is grouped mode, but we will not say no. We don't have the means to say no. This is correct. This is likely. So we tend to believe that grouped mode is best for most use cases, but the fact that we need to keep compatibility to the individual mode is already something that makes harder to confidently say no. Okay, stability-wise, we are covered.
I think that Slinky is using the not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and there are challenges in we cannot just say, hey, okay, whatever, just use individual mode, because for once the sheer number of devices is going to cause problem, and that number is gonna only gonna increase. So I'm just trying to say that there is not a clear winner. There are cases for both approaches, and that we have already two different shapes of the devices. How the device looks like, it's already a concerning factor stability-wise.
I mean, I don't have doubts we will have more ways to expose it, because CPUs comes in so many shapes and forms, and like people may want to target it differently. So I think it will be more than that.
Okay.
Do we? I mean, one way to set a target, like, and I'm asking this question not because I have a better idea. I just asking because I don't know the future, and I don't know whether we know the future by this KubeCon, by next KubeCon, or never. Because I mean, you never know what else is coming. So I'm trying to understand if we can get any target that is not that we know the future, and we know like that we expose the like right CPU shapes, but in a form that adoption is there. So maybe like Slinky can be like, as long as Slinky works, we call it GA, and then like we iterate and see how to transition from that state to another state. Because like trying to say that we know the future and like we know what other scenarios and other shapes we need to expose it in, it's kind of, I mean, it's a moving target. I don't know whether we will get to that there ever.
I'm not saying, hey, never GA because I mean, it's a moving target. I'm not saying no, we will wait forever up until GA, but I'm saying that at this point, it's hard to me to say when. I mean, when enough data is enough. This is what I'm trying to say. So having something reasonably stable by KubeCon North America, it's fair to me because it gives us, I would say, a couple of releases and hopefully some user feedback about that. GA carries expectations, and rightly so. This is what I'm trying and to say. And I'm totally saying I personally don't have enough data to promise that, but it's going to be open conversation. So I can only close saying I hope I'm wrong, but at this point, lack of data is the concerning and limiting factor.
And by data, you mean more feedback from users?
Yes, that's the first thing by all means.
Could we have a beta then, so users?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course. Okay, this is on me because it was obvious to me, but I never said that explicitly. I see that like graduating like any other Kubernetes feature. So alpha, maybe two alphas, and then beta. And the more we progress, the more guarantees we provide. So this is why I was, kind of resisting to the say, oh, call it GA, because hey, first alpha, then GA seems kind of jump. So I should have articulated better. I totally see this maturing, but maturing slower than some, including me, would like to see, because it's basically uncharted territory.
I mean, I will ask, can we do beta by this KubeCon?
I think so. I would think so.
Okay. So 0.1 is definitely not beta. Like we just need to learn how to do release. And then like maybe by you and Marlo talks, we can get a beta announced.
Yeah.
Because like I don't see how else people will adopt it. Like 0.1 doesn't tell confidence and doesn't tell that it's working.
Because I have fair point, but on the other hand, 1.0 feels premature. Anyway, Praveen, Marlo, if you have any comments or do you disagree, feel free to keep me honest.
Yeah, like if we have decided on dropping the webhook, we are very close to having a 1.0.1 release. Like calling it beta or not, like I mean, yeah, maybe I don't know.
I mean, we don't have to go to GA if we're not there in time, but I think this is pretty developed.
So let's definitely do 0.1 release. It sounds like Sergey is recommending or encouraging maybe a 0.2 release that we call beta. Like just cut a 0.1 like right now as quickly as possible, and then in 2 weeks cut a 0.2 right before KubeCon or during KubeCon, and call that beta. What the criteria are, we would have to write down and make sure we can do that. But it would be nice going to your talk to be able to say, here's a beta release, people can try it out, as opposed to here's a 0.1 alpha type release and nobody looks at it. I think that's Sergey's main point, is like, people aren't going to put it in production workloads right away, right? So like, how do we get the feedback and get people to at least start experimenting with it, and get some more input?
And since we have
Okay, so
more time on this meeting, do you want to discuss naming really quickly? Like, if brainstorm some ideas. If you need to rename it to make it memory and CPU, maybe network in future. Like, I don't know whether DRA net will somehow.
So network is different because I mean NIC modeling is probably pretty different than, I don't know. CPU and memory go together pretty closely, but what about other native resources like huge pages? Is that part of the memory?
I think huge pages should be part of the memory, and
but probably not like ephemeral storage or something like that.
no.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, in my opinion, it's going to be like CPU memory and huge pages, because in a sense, huge pages are a form of memory, a form of, rapid memory. Anyway, they are taken from the same pool by definition. So naming is a good point. I I don't have good suggestion at this point in time. I do see, however, memory support being merged sooner than later. Probably at the same time we call it beta. I'm not saying it's a must to have beta, but I'm saying the timeline kind of converge. So I see that happening sooner than later.
I mean, it could just be called CPU mem. Like, we don't have to be too fancy, but if we think it's going to be in there.
That would actually work for me.
I'd prefer we weren't fancy because then we're clear on what it is.
CPU mem could work.
Marlo, I didn't follow.
Be simple where possible is generally my rules on these.
Right. So you agree or disagree with
I agree.
CPU?
I agree.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
So there is DRA net and DRA CPU mem.
Kinda. I don't think it's going to be decided now, but works for me at this point in time.
There are some other, so let me just device ecosystem. There's a few other, let me share this. Share. So these are the ones, so right, these are vendor specific and these are the vendor neutral ones that, so like, right, there's, so SRIOV, I don't know if that's SRIOV like for any PCIe. I haven't, for any virtual functions. We probably want to keep that separate. CNI and network. So there's DRA net. These are kind of the things that depend on just like Linux kernel features as opposed to like vendor, specific stuff. To me, it makes sense CPU and memory, but all the others probably live on their own because they're things over the PCI bus, for the most part. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, the CNI one is also like another layer. Yeah. Okay, I guess that's it for today. It sounds like we're sort of roughly aligned on that, but like let's try to definitely get a release out before this QCon.
So I can start a doc about like the GA discussion with Francesco and Marlo, and maybe we can share it more broadly in the maybe next working group meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And RJ from Node Readiness Controller went through a bunch of releases right now, like just recently, so he may have some fresh information. Praveen, Francesco, you can probably ask many questions.
Yeah, I can reach out to Ajay.
Yeah, just to share knowledge.
Okay, anything else, folks, or should we get our 15 minutes back? All right, thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.